Tonight we're going to be looking at John 18. I think the official handout told me to start in verse 33. And we were going to go John 18:33 through 19:22. I actually want to start at 18:28 because that first couple of verses there is important lead up to understand what's going on and kind of sets up the whole stage of what's going to be going on tonight. So Natalie, you've got the first one. I was about to start over with that.
Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken, to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?"
So, Jesus has just been betrayed by Judas. He's been sold out for silver. He's been arrested. He's been taken. And he's been examined in front of the high council since probably 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. He was arrested. It's likely that they appear in front of Pilate's residence around 6 o'clock in the morning, give or take, is when this day kind of kicks off for Pilate. And we see that the Pharisees will not even go inside. They want this from the governor of Judea. They want this man executed, but they won't even go inside the palace, the praetorium, because it's the preparation day for the Passover. It's the Friday. This particular Passover occurred on a Sabbath, which happens sometimes. And the Passover lamb is always slaughtered the day before, that day of, and then at sundown you start the eating and the roasting, but it's done that day. And in the book of Numbers, it tells us that if you touch a dead body, then you cannot celebrate the Passover. You can't partake. You get to do the makeup Passover that's a month later. And so that's the actual in Numbers 9:6 is that if anybody touches a dead body, it's the only thing that can make you, according to the Moses law, that can make you unclean for Passover. There's a lot of things that can make you unclean ceremonially in the Jewish faith that you would have to do a day of purification. But when it comes to Passover, there's only this one thing, but it's interesting that by the time they get here, it's morphed, it's expanded. They have expanded it out like they've done with everything else, that they don't want to risk walking into the governor's mansion and perhaps touching something that is not clean. There could be pork in there. There could be, an unclean object. There could be, he's a Roman. It's as unclean as you get. And so they will not risk defiling themselves and not being able to partake. So Pilate has to come out to them. And so Pilate hears their argument here. And he tries to punt right away. He says, "Take them away. Judge them on your own law." And Luke tells us that they had told him this guy is professing to be king of the Jews. We don't see John telling us that, but Luke tells us that that's what they come with. And so he says, "Judge him by your own laws." He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. But then they go, only the Romans are permitted to execute someone. They were going to stone him. Back in John, I can't remember. We talked about it 4 or 5 weeks ago. The first time that he had called himself the I Am, they picked up rocks to stone him, and yet it wasn't his time. But yet they tell him only a Roman can execute someone. It's not that they just want to kill him, but they want to hang him on a tree. Deuteronomy 21:23 says, whoever is hanged on a tree is an affront or cursed to God. And so they not only want to repudiate him, they not only want to disgrace him, they not only want to undercut his claim of Messiah, but they want to go so far as to publicly demonstrate that this is a man that is cursed of God. It's not enough that they stone him as a blasphemer. They want to curse him even in his death. They want to weaponize the law to curse the one who is the law. 34 through 40. Parker?
Jesus answered, do you say this on your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not for or from the world. Then Pilate said to him, so you are a king? Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Pilate said to him, what is truth? After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? They cried out again, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
So, what irony does it strike you when Pilate says, what is truth? What is that? Does that jump out at anybody as being just incredibly ironic? Does it mean anything to anybody when you read that?
He knows that they're not telling the truth the whole time, but he gives into pressure, eventually does what they want. But that's always how it kind of came across to me in reading across all the Gospels, is that Pilate never wanted anything to do with his death, just as much as they didn't want to do the death.
Yeah, Pilate does not want to kill Jesus. And as we continue reading, it's going to become abundantly clear as he punts again and again and again, desperately trying to maneuver his way out as the Pharisees skillfully hem him in. But here's this cynical Roman politician, Jesus saying, I came to testify to the truth. And like so many spin people on television, just spin the truth. What is truth? As if somehow it's not absolute. Some things are debatable, but truth, absolute truth about God isn't. And it's amazing to me that Pilate could look truth in the eye and yet be blind to the truth in front of him. It's perhaps the most important question anybody ever asks in their life. What is truth? And Pilate asked this question and he misses it standing in front of him. Alex?
Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers also twisted together a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and clothed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him and saying, Hail, King of the Jews, or slapping his face. Pilate went outside again and said to them, Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know I find no grounds for charging him. Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, Here is the man. When the chief priest and the temple servants saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate responded, "Take him and crucify him yourselves, since I find no grounds for charging him." "We have a law," Jews replied to him. "According to that law, he ought to die, as he made himself the Son of God."
So he made himself the Son of God. So the first question I wrote up on there is the recognition of the king. Pilate is going to refer to Jesus as the King of the Jews 4 times over the course of this passage. The first one we just read in verse 39. And then as we move forward, there's going to be 4 more times where Pilate refers to Jesus as the King of the Jews. But how is Jesus' kingdom different than these earthly kingdoms? How is Jesus' kingdom different?
Jesus states it's not of this world. Kingdom's not of this world.
My kingdom is not of this world. What else is different about Jesus' kingdom?
Geographically, earthly kingdoms have borders and boundaries. Jesus' kingdom doesn't.
Yeah, it's not a physical place. Jesus' kingdom is spiritual, right? He's coming to provide spiritual recognition, to be the Lord of our soul, of our life. It's interesting that in the end they will hang a sign over him in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek that says King of the Jews, in the language of the people of Israel, in the language of Rome, and in the language of the world, which was Greek at that time. And John 1:11 says he came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. And they mocked him, they beat him, they did not want to recognize him. But in the end, his kingdom wasn't anything for them to be afraid of. He wasn't looking for their earthly power or position. It didn't mean anything. Because he's the Lord. He owns everything. Yes, 8 through 12, is that? Yes.
When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then saith Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee? Jesus answered, Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. From thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar.
The rejection of Jesus. Why didn't Jesus come as a victorious king the first time around? Why not come as that ruler that the Jews had been looking for, missing the spiritual components of Isaiah 53 and missing the spiritual healing? Why were they only looking for the physical ruler, and why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he come as a victorious king?
I think that's what people will be expecting. Jesus doesn't want to be like everyone else. He was being different because he was looking, like he wanted the people that were poor, and like he wanted everyone, not just certain people, to be like in power or have access. Or because like when we mentioned like the differences between Pilate's kingdom and Jesus, when Jesus wants everyone, where Pilate is going to have certain rulers and people that are in place, and only certain people can like approach him. And so that's.
It's also really just a demonstration of Christ's love and of God's love. Like, it'd be really easy to say, we have this like godly figure who comes and just is victorious over everything. But what love does that show compared to the suffering of Christ? Like, there's no sacrifice that will be seen like that of Christ.
Yeah. That's exactly it. That Jesus came to show us the immeasurable love of God. That while we were yet enemies, he was willing to die for us. And while we in the Romans, it can look like he didn't come to be victorious the first time, he really was victorious, because he was victorious over the far more important thing than the physical borders of Israel. He was victorious over death. He was victorious over the enemy that had been at war with man back and forth, death and Satan, dragging us into hell, denying us, convincing us not to have a relationship with God. And here Jesus comes as the ultimate sacrifice, this ultimate lamb, and shows us this unbelievable love. And he is victorious. And Caesar is long gone. There is no Roman Empire. But yet there are billions of Christians around the world, and billions more that have lived. And one day every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess. It only looked like he was defeated in the moment. But yet, in the end, all of the plotting, all of the scheming of the Pharisees, all the way back to John 5:17, when they tried to stone him for the first time. Jesus did not come to provide this outlet of religion. He came for a relationship. The Pharisees were fighting to maintain their religious power. And they maneuver Pilate by talking about the fact that if he allows him to live, he's no friend of Caesar's. They appeal to his political desire. And then they start looking at rebellion and uprising. And so they put him in a position of fear, where he eventually agrees to kill Jesus, not because he thinks there's any guilt in him. It says 3 times in John that I find no guilt in him. But yet eventually he's willing to kill him because he does not want a riot. He does not want an insurrection. He makes the political compromise. And the Pharisees, so obsessed with power, so consumed with wickedness, literally stand in front of Pilate and say, "We have no king but Caesar." A group of people that have hated Rome since the day they came, have been constantly in rebellion. In fact, the person that they're arguing for, they look at him and say, "We have no king but Caesar. And hey, this guy that was arrested for rebelling and launching an insurrection against your rule, release him to us. Kill Jesus. We'll take Barabbas back, the revolutionary." Oh, the wickedness with which what the Pharisees were willing to spin just to hold on to their power. The ultimate talking out of 2 sides of your mouth. I have no king but Caesar, but give me the guy that's trying to overthrow Caesar. Okay? And Jesus says that the one who handed me over has greater sin. Because here's Caiaphas, the high priest, the one charged with the religious, spiritual health of the nation, the one that's supposed to go into the room every year with Yom Kippur and stand before the throne. And he's the one delivering up the Son of God. Rachel? Maybe not.
It's supposed to be Emily.
Emily.
It's supposed to be-
Emily.
What? For the last verses. Or didn't you volunteer for those verses?
Amanda's got the last ones.
13 through 16? I think you just wrote.
And I wrote Rachel instead of Emily for some crazy reason. That's why. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. Even as I said it out, I'm like, wait a minute.
My name's not up there. What did you tell me?
As I said it out loud and I looked at you, I'm like, wait a minute. That's not the situation. Yeah. Sorry.
When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here's your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "Take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified.
All right. And then Amanda, you want to finish this out?
They took Jesus, therefore, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to a place called the place of the skull, which is called in the Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Jesus in between. Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. It was written, "Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews." Therefore many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, "Do not write, the King of the Jews." But he said, "I am the King of the Jews." But that he said, "I am the King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written."
So the response to Jesus, why should the suffering of Jesus give us confidence in him as our King?
Comforts me because I can think about the suffering I'll experience in my life, but with Jesus, who walked the same walk, and he was victorious in the suffering, and I can write off his victory. He's defeated death and suffering as a whole.
Yeah.
It's comforting.
Isn't it comforting to know that there's no temptation that we experience that he has not? That there's no suffering that we experience that he hasn't? Why else does his suffering give us confidence? How does that give us confidence in Jesus?
It shows just total devotion, like more so than any other human who's ever lived, and it's something that we should work to mirror, is that kind of devotion to God on our own.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Secret Service are kind of famous for this idea that they would take a bullet for the president. Maybe, allegedly. Some of them have. One did for Reagan. And yet Jesus, instead of an earthly ruler that seeks physical protection from the people around him, from his subjects, Jesus takes the bullet for us. Jesus is the one jumping into harm's way for us. Jesus protects us instead of us having to protect him. He is the one that will go out and find that lost sheep and bring us back. We're hopelessly lost without him, right? And yet when we have his word dwelling in us, then we can be willing to die and to serve and to love one another. In Philippians, Paul wrote, "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others." There's no greater testimony in all of history to regard one another as more important than yourself than Jesus' willingness to sacrifice himself for us. And that's our ultimate example and our model. There's nothing that the world can teach us about how to model or how to have a godly relationship with the Lord. We have to go to Jesus because it's so completely opposite to anything that the world would ever tell us. Nobody in the world would ever tell you to put somebody else's interests above your own. This is... We live in a world where, we love the self-made man, self-made person, instead of the one that sacrifices. Jesus is this perfect servant love. All right. Anybody have anything they want to chime in with?
Yeah, I was thinking just some of those questions about the illustration of just washing the feet. I don't know when they wash the feet, wash the feet of others. Maybe think of the kings of the world, such as Caesar. The last person who did get down and wash a homeless man's feet, but yet Jesus rides in on a donkey. It's his first thought to serve and to wash the feet of the lowly. I just think it's quite the contrast.
Yeah, his ways are not our ways. It's the exact opposite. Where one demands to be served, the other serves. Where one takes, the other gives. So application plan, if you want in your journals, briefly. Just, write down 3 bullet points of what you learned and what your next step is and who you'd like to hold you accountable. And we'll do that for a couple minutes, then we'll close in prayer.